Today's show, we're going to talk about preventing threats in content collaboration, reducing the risk of third-party content. And since both of you are working on products that directly help prevent this risk and these threats that we find, I'm very excited to have you on. So we have Drew Vogelsang. He is a product manager at Box Shield. And we have Seth Hammerman, senior sales engineer at Votiro. Thanks you guys both for being coming on to this. All right.
Happy to be here.
So why don't you introduce yourselves? Drew, you go first.
Thanks. My name is Drew Vogelsang.
I'm a product manager within the Box Shield team at Box, specifically leading our threat protection team. So excited to be here.
Awesome. And Seth?
I'm Seth Hammerman. Been with Votiro about 7 months, but I'm really not new to cybersecurity. I've been doing it for longer than I care to admit. But thanks for having me, and pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Here's the first question I want to pose to both of you. Cybersecurity is newer in the world of business and security, and content collaboration, I feel, is also newer. Stuff that's not just sending emails back and forth, but actually collaborating, sharing documents en masse, allowing access into things like Box with your third parties and your vendors. What challenges are companies facing today when they're trying to secure the collaboration environments? Drew?
Yeah, I think at least
from what we've seen at Box, one of the main challenges is making sure that we enable frictionless collaboration while still maintaining a granular level of security. Because as end users, you want to use your collaboration platform to get your work done. That's why you're using it. And if the tool that you're using becomes a barrier to that, then users are going to try to go and use something else. And if they try to go and use something else, maybe that product isn't procured by your company, or maybe it isn't as secure. And then that's an open, threat vector that can be used against you. So it's making sure that you have a platform that, has that security, but also enables that collaboration as well.
Yeah, because if you're putting too many controls or controls that block things, like you said, this is the same thing with shadow IT, right? Now there's a shadow collaboration.
Exactly.
What do you think, Seth?
I think that the old approach doesn't work anymore. The old castle and moat approach to file security doesn't work. The internet and file sharing has been growing exponentially, but a recent development, a couple of years ago that we all know very well, just kind of pushed this forward at light speed, and that was the pandemic. And that was companies going from on-prem to remote, companies basically overnight. I remember a customer who basically went from on-prem Exchange to Office 365 in the cloud in a weekend. So, talk about file collaboration. That was great. They saved a lot of money, but I actually knew the CISO, and he said to me, Seth, I'm scared to death. I'm like, what's wrong? He goes, well, the business wanted us to migrate to the cloud. We did that, but nobody really thought about security. And I don't know who's sharing my files. I don't know where they're going. I don't know, all these different data points of control. And, this is a very common problem. And I think, I don't think I know that it's becoming, it's severe. And the controls that Drew was talking about are absolutely necessary. But again, I agree with him in that they have to be as frictionless as possible. Otherwise, employees, members of organizations are going to look for other ways to share files, send, receive, whatever. And we see this all the time. So again, we'll get to this in a little bit. I'll expand on that, but these attacks are always changing because technology, if you look at Moore's law and how fast things have become, how automated they've become, the bad actors have become very, very adept at evading the traditional security controls. So it's up to us to not only, talk the talk of zero trust, but actually implement it. So that's what I think.
Good points. So yeah, so some of the threats or challenges in implementing and securing collaboration include things like, what is my collaboration? Is there a third-party collaboration tool being used that's a shadow collaboration tool? How do I make it so that our employees want to use our collaboration platforms and not use shadow collaborations? And I have to set up collaboration environments quickly to enable the business. How do I make sure they're secure when we kind of have to do this lickety split, right? All right. So when we're saying content collaboration, what is content, right? And majority of time it's files, right? It's documents, it's images, it's things, it's Excels, it's stuff that you share with your third parties and your vendors and your partners, that you can work on things together so that you can send things to them, they can send things to you, et cetera, et cetera. So how are threat actors leveraging the files to deploy malware on people's environments using content collaboration?
I'll take that, Gianna, because you just kind of validated the point I was talking about of how AI and other sorts of super quick automation tools can be used for bad and used to create zero-day weaponized files to infiltrate a company. As a matter of fact, I read somewhere that more than 60-something% of the successful attacks, and they're usually by phishing, but also by file sharing, are using these weaponized files to get a foothold in the customer's environment. And then from there on, it's land and expand in the rest of the whole threat, the kill chain, if you remember that. So it's pretty insidious way to do it. And if you look at the, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but this is what I do. I'm an engineer. But if you look at the structure of, let's say, a Word file and all the different OLE objects and XML that's in there, I had no idea before I learned about Votiro and CDR that it was so complex and so easy to hide, let's say, a malicious PowerShell script or a bad URL, a redirect to a bad URL to download bad stuff. It's quite easy to do. And a lot of the current traditional tools don't process those weaponized files. So that, and my point is that you cannot rely on your traditional methods to keep you safe. And again, that kind of, speaks to the new, the actual true use of zero trust, and where, there's no trust but verified. Everything, every file going into Box should be suspect and should be sanitized. That's just one aspect of it. But this is something that's really scary. I don't see it getting better anytime soon, but it's harder to do the work and actually take a look at everything in your environment to make sure that wherever the files are coming from, especially when they're coming into Box, right, that they're clean and they're sanitized, but they're still usable, and users can share them without causing World War III within your network, and that you're not going to affect their productivity. Make sense?
Makes sense to me. Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
this is a tough question that a lot of CISOs and security professionals are facing today. At Box, we've had conversations with customers and almost have come up with this new phrase that akin to content is the new barrier. Is, there used to be this concept of a firewall, or you can protect, like you were saying, Seth, like you create the castle. And especially now with people working remotely, the pandemic pushing people to that type of hybrid work, now you have to think about the content individually. And there's some pros and there's also some cons that comes with. The cons are, is like you said, Seth, traditional methods are harder to do now. And you need to think about, how am I protecting my collaboration tools? But also, how am I protecting my content? And then I think the pros with this approach, though, is that if you're looking at content specifically, there are certain protections on some content that are more important than other pieces of content. So why, expose all of your content, with some of which may be very public documentation that you want to expose to the world? Another content might be very confidential IP. In that, situation, focusing just on content gives you the freedom to say, okay, well, let me lock things down for what I need to, and let me open things up for what I need to do. And that's where, forms of classification and DLP really come into play for a proactive approach. And then using, I would say mechanisms potentially such as Votiro for, a very kind of protective, sanitation of content as well. So.
There's that, right? There's that ingress of content in, and then there's that egress of content out. And the ingress should, is, hey, is there something in here that's bad, that's going to potential, some malware, some things we don't want to come in. And then on the other side too, there's, hey, we don't want to share this with the world, with anyone who wants to access it. This has PII in it. This has, this should only be shown to 3 people in the company. It shouldn't be shown to third parties. How do we prevent exfiltration to those that we don't want access to this content? I think is what you're saying, Drew, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. So, okay. This is our last question. And it's a good one. What are some best practices businesses can implement to protect against hidden threats in content?
We talked about the castle and moat, right? That's still in place. But now, since the pandemic and everybody's remote, files are everywhere, right? So that doesn't work. And if you want to create a true zero trust model, don't start with your existing IAM systems, your existing firewalls, your existing gateways, so forth and so on. You have to look at kind of like the left side of your network, where the files are coming from that you don't know about. Right? Okay, I'll give you a real world example. Right after Felina, there was a vulnerability with Microsoft Teams that allowed users. So if I invited a guest to a Teams session and their company was using Office 365, and they had a Teams account, if I invited them and they got into my Teams session, they could actually put little animated GIFs and files into the chat, right, with no security controls around it, because God love Microsoft, they're fantastic, but when it comes to security, I always go back to the shared responsibility model, and you can look it up, but it applies everywhere. But what happens is this particular vulnerability was exploited by the bad guys in that they were creating cute little GIFs of Pikachu, but buried in the GIF, the oldest trick in the book, steganography, under the hood of the GIF was scripts that would basically land and expand and do recon on your network once you clicked on the GIF. Then you click on Pikachu, nothing's happening. But under the hood, a lot of stuff is happening. And if you use the default security settings within Teams, everything is wide open. And Microsoft found out about the vulnerability and is not issuing a patch, and basically issued a statement saying it's up to customers to secure their own environments. So lesson learned, right? Don't take things for granted. Take a look at every way that files can come into your organization, right? And standardize on a file sharing platform. Like Gianna was saying, there's no reason that a company of, let's say, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 people should have, a dozen or more file sharing platforms. There's no reason. You have to kind of, I'm not going to say crack the whip, but have a policy where, let's standardize on Box. So if you try to share files from any platform in my network, I'm going to shut you down. I'm working with Box because it's centralized and I have security controls that actually work for my file sharing. So yeah, your user community may, threaten mutiny, but for the little bit of pain, in the long run, you'll be a lot happier because, you won't have to deal with the embarrassment and the financial ruin of having ransomware come into your environment. So again, my message is take a look at everything. If your files are coming from everywhere, standardize on a platform that you can control somewhat. And Box is perfect for that.
Drew, you started in the last call, and I think this ties to what Seth just said here. Or in the last slide, you said content is the barrier. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So
I think really going off what Seth said, understanding where your content lives and who has access to it is imperative right now. I think, you go to cybersecurity professionals across the industry, no one is going to, disagree with you that, okay, well, we need to have, systems of protection in place, whether, that is, some sort of, scanning software or sanitation software or anything across the board in terms of protecting, what comes in and what goes out as well. But the question then is, okay, well, what, proactive approach are you doing on content? Because, if we take this idea of content as the barrier, then like Seth was, alluding to, we need to go to the content itself and think about, okay, well, what teams are accessing what tools and what content are they accessing across those tools? Can we standardize that? Should the whole team have access to everything, or should they not? And then from there, have specific controls around, okay, well, how is this content moving in and through your organization and out of your organization? Because that's, I think, the number one critical thing is that we need to open up to the idea of internal and external collaboration in this business world. We can't lock ourselves in and, to run an effective business. But when opening yourself up to these external parties, the question is okay, well, where do they have access and what do they have access to? And if you have a strong knowledge of what your content is, then you can effectively make those decisions. And then it's, finding a platform that allows you to do that. That's, I think, what I meant by that, and kind of going into a little bit more detail there. But
it reminds me a lot, and I just wanted to drill down on that for a second, because it reminds me a lot of what we're talking about with zero trust. Zero trust in the broader world, most people think of identity and access management, right? But if you apply zero trust to content, both inbound and outbound, trusting that what's coming in is free of malicious items, trusting that what you're sending, because you verify it via your own controls in Box, is going to the right places. I mean, data and content traverses so many boundaries between partners, between third parties, internally, externally, that it's potentially a great first starting place too for when people are thinking about zero trust. Is showing up full size? It is. All right. So closing statements from both of you. Thank you so much for being on, for chatting on this fireside chat here. I think that, Box and Votiro have formed a great partnership. The fact is that we're both two frictionless products that focus on the user experience while making sure that that user is safe and everything that it touches Box is safe, regardless of what part of the world it is in Box, right? Is it entering? Is it inside of Box? Is it exiting, etc.? So, Drew, maybe you could talk a little bit about the value of Box Shield and where Votiro and Box really have a partnership together.
absolutely. So
The true value of Shield is, at least what we call frictionless security, which is something we've talked about a lot. But with Shield, we have two key aspects of the platform. That's our smart access controls and our threat protection in a suite of policies. And with smart access, we seek to, empower admins a lot of what we discussed today, which is classifying content, whether that's through an auto classification means or through manually classifying content, or via a partner application as well. And making sure that when you have content that's classified as, confidential or, internal, public, that you can enforce different rules on that content that allow collaboration in different ways. And then on the threat protection side, and this is where we see that true, I would say, partnership with Votiro, is we have several threat protection policies around, one, malware scanning, but also anomaly detection. And that's where I think Box's Shield's true value lies, because you can utilize, Votiro for content sanitation before it comes in the box. And then we have policies to also just double check it coming in, even though, Votiro has an amazing product that's able to sanitize before it comes in. But with Box, we have so much information on the content itself and around collaborations that we have designed machine learning policies to actually detect anomalous behavior and alert admins. So a great example, and I'll end on this, that I love, is we have an anomalous download rule that aims to detect data exfiltration. And we've had several success stories from customers of employees leaving the company, and whether they're disgruntled or they're just negligent and they try to download a lot of content. Box is able to look at previous download patterns and flag it to the admin and say, hey, user A is doing some suspicious activity. You might want to check this. And so many admins have come to us and said, we caught them just in the nick of time before they left. So just another example, I think, how, Votiro has that great sanitation coming into Box. And then when your content's in Box, our policies are really able to leverage the knowledge of content and collaboration and what happens there. Does that make sense?
It does. Seth, what any closing remarks on the partnership? Can you tell maybe the listeners about a little bit more about Votiro and Votiro's integration with Box?
Super easy. If I can do it, anybody can do it. It's really easy to set up. But just to kind of add on to what Drew was saying, first question that I ask customers is, how do you handle weaponized content files? In other words, Word docs with malicious macros, or, a PowerShell script buried deep in it. The issue is that they are all zero-day threats. Every weaponized file is different. And the traditional way of detecting them, virus signatures, recorded behavior, AI, and so forth, just doesn't work, because each one of these is brand new and has never been seen before. It's real easy to do that. So we take that out of the picture once these files come into Box. We sanitize these files, and we don't turn them into PDF bricks like other solutions do. We don't rip the guts out and just send a PDF and just say, we found something malicious and that it's unusable. I mean, that used to pass muster, but nowadays you just crushed 6 months of somebody in finance's hard work working on an Excel, or a bunch of complicated Excel macros to do a function, and some email security gateway thinks it's malicious, so boom, it just flattens it. No. So I think the big value add here for Box is that we're taking away that risk factor when files come from anywhere and get uploaded into Box, as long as we are connected via our API. We're taking care of that sanitization. And in the meantime, not only are we sanitizing the file, but we're rendering it 100% usable. And then, Box Shield is going to put the additional controls on it, which you must have, right? To Drew's point, if you've got PII, if you've got PCI DSS data, if you've got anything that would violate any sort of data protection rules, and they're growing all the time. Everybody was crazed a couple of years ago, right? When Germany came out with GDPR, but there are more rules coming. I mean, you've got California with COPPA, and now you've got New York State coming out with it. So, there's real penalties for violating these data protection rules.
Mhm.
And again, Drew is totally right in that you have to be aware of that and put the right controls around it. So in our partnership, you can trust the fact that when Votiro sanitizes this content and it comes into Box, then the actions can be taken on it. And you can have totally safe content. You'll know where it's who's going to share it, who's going to be shared with, what is in the, what kind of metadata is in the file that you have to protect, or you have to make sure that you're in compliance with whatever kind of regulation there is. So, it just smooths out that process.
I think it's the end to end is
yeah.
sort of right. If you think
Yeah,
about
thanks.
the journey of a file from wherever it's sent to whatever it ends to its storage environment, and then wherever it needs to go to multiple people, Box and Votiro cover that end to end, from ingress to classification, to discovery, to distribution, and to revoking that distribution when you need to.
Good way of putting it.
Absolutely.
All right. If you want, thank you to my two awesome guests for being on today. This was very fun. So if you want to learn more about the Votiro Box partnership, from the Votiro side of the house, you can visit votiro.com/partners/box. And on Box, we're on the Box Marketplace. All right, catch you next time. And for both of you, if someone wants to reach out to either of you to ask questions about Box or about Votiro or about the partnership, is there a way people can get in contact?
Yeah. Seth@votiro.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk about CDR, file security, and get deep into the weeds at any time. So more than happy to answer questions and talk about it.
And Drew?
And for me, I'm
on LinkedIn as well, and my email is dv@box.com. So Vogel's saying you had to get creative with the name, so you don't have to spell it out.
You have like a cool 2-letter email address at Box. Were you one of the founders, man? Like, that's crazy.
Oh, no.
All right. Well, thanks to you both, and we'll catch you next time